I certainly love getting emails from all of you, and one of the most asked questions is, how do I handle resizing quilt blocks to change the size or the perspective within the pattern? So you ready? Let me walk you through it. Let's get stitching. Well, welcome back everybody to another terrific video right here at So Well. My name is Rob Appell. I'm your host from Stitchin Heaven. I'm super glad to see all of you out there for another Learn to Quilt with Rob style video. Now this could probably apply to just about any of us out there, and to all of us super creative people that just glance at the pattern and then go do our own thing anyways. You're welcome for today's video. So what are we talking about? We're talking about how do we resize quilt blocks, quilt patterns, and some of the ways that I would approach that information. So today, before we go any further, please hear me say this. I do not think that resizing your quilt is something that should be done the moment you find inspiration, pick the pattern and start picking fabrics. I really want you to choose your pattern like we're going to do today. I've got 3 patterns to talk about, and I want you to evaluate the way the pattern is constructed and then take one of my 2 methods on how you're going to resize. I guess there's actually 3 methods because we can just add more and more borders down the road, but that's not as fun. We're going to approach patchwork first, right? But there are a lot of challenges, both mathematically and layout visually, that happen when you start to resize patterns. So let's start with the simple and work our way towards the more complex conversation. Here's one I've just put out recently called Texas on a String. All 3 of the patterns we're going to discuss today are digital downloads. You can also get some of those kits from us at Stitchin Heaven. Links in the description as always. I want you to look at this. At first it looks like a log cabin project, but it's really a foundation strip piecing project built off of a foundation of fabric, not paper. So with that said, each block here is going to either be looked at as a light color block or a light and dark colored block. And all of the blocks basically start by taking a square and then stitching onto strips down the middle. They were just stitched down the middle, okay? And then building outward in both directions. So how do we resize this pattern? The first thing I do is I come back to the original cover, and I can see by creating the 4 large stars and leaving this that if I enlarge the pattern, I'm going to basically want to double it. So I'm adding on 4 more stars and then at least another row of stars. So one option is just simply make more. And a lot of times that's the easiest. Now your supply list is not going to be accurate anymore on the back. You might want to double the fabrics if you're doubling the size of the project. But the nice thing is all of the instructions stay the same. But if it told you to make, let's say, 20 of these 10-inch squares, then you would make 40 of the 10-inch squares and you would just double everything. But do pay attention to your layout diagram, because sometimes you have specific corner blocks, and no matter how much bigger you make a project, you still only have 4 corners. And that's why sometimes when you, I was going to say mess around, but you start to change the size of the blocks, you can get into some real hot water. So for something like this, I would simply just make more of the blocks and make more of the stars to make more of the quilt. We could always adjust the size of the borders as well. But the truth of the matter is, this is such a simple style of sewing construction. If you wanted this quilt twice the size, but this exact same appearance, then you would simply double your size foundation square. You would have longer strips, but you would do the exact same quantity. So you're doubling the size of the background square. And let's stop there. All of us should be very in tune to our 1/4 inch seam allowance, or our quilter's math, meaning that we have a 1/4 inch on both sides. So if I call this a 10-inch square, it's really going to finish at 9.5 inches into the project. So we really should subtract that 1/2 inch, the 1/4 of both sides, before we double it. So now let's do easy math, so to speak. If this was an 8.5 inch block and I wanted it to be half the size, I would make a 4.5, not 4.25, but 4.5 inch block, because I still need those same 1/4 inch seam allowances. If I wanted to make it twice as large, I would make it a 16.5, not a 17, because again, those 1/4 inch seam allowances are just seam allowances. I'm hoping that makes sense. There's other math involved with triangles that start to call in for 7/8 or 1/8 inch cuts kinds of things, and that gets really tricky. So let's now talk about one of the projects I would only add blocks to, or possibly borders. And that's this one right here. We call it Swirling Waters. It's a storm at sea looking pattern. It's really, really cool. You can see here's the block. This is one of the blocks. There's actually multiple blocks in this project because it's on point, meaning the blocks are point up. We have setting edge pieces, and we also have corners. Remember, every quilt only has 4 corners if it's a square or rectangle. So the amount of these edge pieces may change, but the corners would not. The other thing to look at is these are in diagonal rows, and with all of the pieces that are involved in this kind of a project and all of these triangles, the mathematics involved in following the pattern would just be really, really challenging because of all of the triangle math involved. So on a project like this, if I want to make this quilt any larger, I'm going to only add more squares of the same size. I'm not going to try to resize the squares, or the units I should call them. One last thing I want to point out, because of the diagonal layout or layout on point, you have 1 unit, 3 units, 5 units, 5 units, 3 units, 1 unit. So you could actually put in 2 more columns and rows by adding 1 row with 7 units across. That would increase everything in size. You can also then, as you see these borders here, I would recommend then a narrow border of one of the 3 blue fabrics. I would actually go the lighter, then I would go to a medium, and then I'd go to another narrow dark border on the way out if I still needed to add a few extra inches to each side. That way I'm playing with the gradient in the project and I'm getting 3 borders on each side instead of just 1. So I'm not changing how I build the math because there's too many parts and pieces. That's what I'm trying to talk about. You need to evaluate your layout and how the quilt is constructed before you decide if you're going to enlarge the block or just increase the quantity of blocks made and or border use. Okay, and remember, anytime you change this, it's going to greatly change the supply list. And that's the other thing that gets challenging for the folks that are helping you in your local quilt shop, is a lot of times they're doing multiple things at once, and it's a lot to ask of them to help you do all the calculations as well. So definitely take the time to study the pattern before you evaluate how you're going to change. This is another really fun one we've just done recently, and this one's super fun and you can go all over the place even though it looks really complicated. This one's called A New Year, and look at that. Doesn't that look dynamic? But this particular quilt block, whether you're making the tiny one here or the really large one here, they really just started with half square triangles. 4 half square triangles, 4 half square triangles put together in the same fashion, then cut down using the disappearing technique. Got a video for that if you'd like to see it. So you can see here that I've made a huge reduction in size, but that's partly because this was 2 5-inch squares face to face, all 4 sides stitched, forming all 4 of the half square triangle units. And this was 2 big squares set up. I think they might have been 10-inch squares or 9.5-inch squares, sewn across the diagonals and trimmed. So multiple pieces went into that. This project here is really, really interesting looking when it gets really small. But if I got any smaller than those 5-inch squares, I'm going to really lose a lot of those little tiny tips that go missing in there. And yes, those seams are not supposed to match up. That's part of the cool design. So something like this is almost too small, but in my opinion, something like this, it's almost a little bit too big. It's gonna leave these really large parts and pieces that come together that almost start to translate as too much negative space, or as a great spot for a lot of machine quilting. So something like this may be almost too big. When you look at the pattern here, you can quickly tell how it's being assembled. And therefore, you could say, do I want to increase the number of blocks, or do I want to increase the size or decrease the size and then increase the number so that I come up with the same size quilt, but it has a heck of a lot more character to it because it has a lot more little pieces. So backing up, this particular project had the benefit of very simple base construction that I was able to change the sizes very easily to make the same pattern come together, because even though you see triangles, they started as the half square triangle, and that math is something that I can do pretty easily in my head. But when we get back to the Swirling Waters, our Storm at Sea style project, with all of those parts and pieces in there, there's no way I would try to recalculate. I would simply just build more, or technically less, squares to change the size of this quilt project. Borders are always an option. And then anytime you have a foundation coming together, as long as it's not foundation paper piecing where the parts are forming some sort of a design like a wonderful elephant or giraffe or something like that, these are just going to come together to basically form diamonds. And so it doesn't really matter as long as everything is changed uniformly. You see? So everything would still be able to come back together. But if these were going in all different directions to form some sort of a scenic, we would definitely not want to change the size of the blocks. We would simply add to the exterior border and maybe even include some fun blocks around it. And now I'm starting to think of a whole nother project. And I guess I do this to you folks all of the time. In the middle of every video, I start thinking about the next video I should create. So in today's comments below, let me know if you're enjoying these Learn to Quilt style videos, if you're learning something with me along in these videos, and if so, what else would you like to learn? I know I've got a ton of new quilters out there. I love to serve all of you, so please let me know what I can do to help you along your quilter's journey. And please make sure that you're visiting our website at stitchinheaven.com for all of your supplies. Links in the bottom below. Check out these awesome patterns. We've got tutorials for each and every one of them. And until I see you next time, folks, please stay well. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end of the video. It really helps support our channel. If you haven't subscribed, do so now. Hit the little button to be notified every time we go live or do a new video for all of you. And here's one from the past I think you'll really enjoy.